Hi everyone, I'm really excited for this live today with a good friend, Sebastian Bates. Welcome to the interview, Sebastian. The Parental CEO was created to help parents become successful both in business and in parenting. We always want to add value to our community by sharing success stories and advice on how to kind of manage the best of both worlds. I'm really excited to look deeper into the subjects of black belt mindset and bullying. But first, tell me a bit about yourself.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for inviting me on, Jamie. Really excited to be here, and I think it's a great mission. Because it's the two things that are quite hard to balance. I think for a lot of parents. Black belt mindset, was that the question? What is a black belt mindset?
No, tell me a bit more about yourself.
Oh, about myself. Sorry. Okay, cool. So, so my name is Sebastian Bates. A bit about my background. Yeah, my name is Sebastian Bates. I'm the founder of the Warrior Academy. So the Warrior Academy is a martial arts organization that specializes in character development. So what that means is we aim to radically transform a child's life by developing their confidence, conduct, and concentration, or what we call the 3 C's, ultimately setting them up for more success and happiness in life as an adult. So we help parents help mentor their children transition through some of the very difficult transitions that children go through, like changing schools, adolescence, and bullying. We started in the UK about 10 years ago in rural England, so lots of villages. And then we expanded quite quickly to around 1,000 students in the UK until we ended up in Dubai, where I am now. We've got about 1,000 students here as well. So certainly the last 3 years, things have very much picked up. For a long period of time during that transition, I was the personal trainer of the royal family here in the UAE and Jordan. So that was obviously a privilege and quite exciting. And yeah, I mean, I'm also I've got a background in extreme sports, professional fighting. So that took up a big part of my life and some exciting stories from that. I know you like stories, Jamie, so we might dig into a little bit of that. But during COVID, during lockdown, we were impacted quite a lot. So I managed to set up several other businesses and ventures. And one of the things I'm very hot on is managing my time while at the same time spending time with my family.
Amen to that. Sounds absolutely fantastic. Summarizes what we're all aspiring to do, managing that time with children and both with business. It can be very difficult at times. I'd like to go a bit further back because I know from speaking to you, didn't you have an accident? Was it base jumping? Have I got that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I grew up in Aldershot. So when I was younger, I was a classic army brat. My dad was in the Paris. He was jumping out of planes every weekend. I used to watch him. And my time as a kid was spent, climbing tanks, doing assault courses, and watching my dad skydive. So for me, challenge and adventure was just a normal part of life. It was that kind of extreme side of adventure was very much built into who I was and my character. And he kind of kicks himself later when he realizes what he created a monster. But yeah, so as I grew up, I wanted to do more and more. When it came to extreme challenges, and that started with cycling across the Sahara Desert when I was 17. I did a lot of adventurous trips like cycling around Turkey, sort of 500-mile plus trips.
Wow.
And eventually professional fighting and Thai boxing for a few years down in Thailand, and then skydiving. So I got into skydiving, and quite quickly I wanted to do more skydiving. So you start skydiving, you do your advanced freefall course, and I was completely hooked. At the same time as this, the background of all of this, I was building my business in martial arts, right? But yeah, to answer your question, essentially, I got into skydiving, accelerated very quickly, got into wingsuit skydiving, then into base jumping. So jumping off bridges, buildings, antennas, and cliffs, and then into wingsuit base jumping, where I completed about sort of 500 jumps, mostly in the Dolomites and the Alps, the most beautiful landscapes you ever kind of pictured. But for me, it ended quite badly. I had a really bad accident where the parachute collapsed in the middle of a jump, and I dropped about 50 foot, about 5 stories, and just broke everything from the waist down. Long story short, the doctor said I'd never walk again. It took me 2 years, from the age of 24 to 26, to relearn how to walk.
Wow.
And yeah, so that kind of ended skydiving for me, or base jumping for me. I have been back since to base jump, but since having kids, it's something which, although I love it and it's an incredible experience, it is ultimately a selfish sport. And so my whole family was quite relieved when I said I wasn't going to base jump anymore.
You were saying it like it was like a normal thing to like jump off a building.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
So calm. I was like,
You know what I always say. I always say you can get used to anything, right?
Yeah.
It's like doing a podcast. With the first time you do a podcast or you interview someone, it's a bit weird and you're a bit nervous about it, and then you just suddenly get used to it. And then by the end, you got such a relaxed attitude with it. You just sort of rock up. But it certainly was that way with base jumping. You know, you put it this way: you can stand on one leg when you're standing on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, when you're standing on the edge of a 3,000-foot drop, it's no different.
Yeah.
The only difference is your mindset.
Yeah.
If you've got the ability to calm down your mind, to calm down, your breath, your breathing, the nerves, your sympathetic nervous system, you can literally be in full control of your body and your mind. It's an amazing power to have over yourself. Yeah. Ultimately, that's controlling fear, right? It's not a lack of understanding of what could happen to you. It's the acceptance of that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think fear is something that definitely took a hold of my life. And it took me a while to kind of reprogram my mind around fear, because your body reacts the same, doesn't it, with fear and excitement. And when we train our mind to say we're scared all the time, then it can become almost like addictive.
Yeah.
Whereas I started to, so for example, I'll give you an example, public speaking. So public speaking, there would be no way you would have got me public speaking. But I just kept telling myself, I'm excited when I got asked to do public speaking gigs. And then, like you say, I think that repetition, doing it starts getting easier and easier and easier and more comfortable.
The more you kind of immerse yourself in something uncomfortable, the more normal it becomes, right? And
yes.
This is one of the things that we mentor young people with, but also their parents. You know, it's just being in that situation and having the courage to step into that situation, or having the courage to allow your children to step into that situation. Because ultimately, what I often find with parents is that the roadblock is them, right? They're the ones preventing their children from experiencing that.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that, because like with my children, I feel like I'm trying to almost wrap them up in cotton wool. So a lot of things in my life have led me to that fear mindset. I think COVID as well. It was almost like, don't come near my children, like stay away. I was getting really defensive and almost going into that fear mindset, which also led me to start making some stupid decisions financially as well, but we won't get into those. Namely, pulling out £6,000 worth of Ethereum that would be worth about 156,000 right now.
I think there's a lot of people probably kicking themselves or jumping for joy right now. But.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But where there's winners, there's losers, definitely.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about that black belt mindset, I think, do you reckon that is good for parents, or that works well for parents as well as the children?
So a black belt mindset.
Yeah.
So what determines a black belt mindset? Really for us, one of the most important yet often missing pieces of a child's education is their character.
Yeah.
There's very little focus on the development of a child's character in traditional education. If you send a child to school, the focus is on their grades, right? A teacher is assessed if they're doing a good job or not. And I've got a family of teachers, and they're constantly assessed if they're doing a good job or not based on the grades of their students, right? They're not measured in how they've impacted the child's life through their character or through their morals or through their moral compass, or what that person is like. It's more to do with their grades. Whereas if you were to focus on a child's character and really aim to develop a child's character, by that I mean we interviewed over 2,000 parents in the UK in 2017 and really got into what it means to develop a child's character. So because for a lot of people it's a bit of a gray area, right? I mean, we narrowed this down to three things, what we call the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration.
Yeah.
And our work with young people or with parents essentially, is to discover what their child's breakthrough area is. And that breakthrough area is the lowest C. So if you go to breakthrougharea.com, you can give this a go. Essentially, it's about 40 questions, and it gives you an insight into a score for each of the 3 Cs. And then what we do is we look to raise up all 3 Cs to a high level. When you bring all 3 Cs up to a high level, you develop what we call a black belt character. Right. So, a child with high levels of conduct is less likely to be influenced by a negative peer group. A child with high levels of confidence is more likely to accept challenges, to seek adventure, and to grow. Yes. A child with high levels of concentration is going to have that focus, that laser focus to learn and to get themselves through challenges and to study in whatever capacity that is. So when you bring those 3 Cs up to a high level, it really ultimately impacts every aspect of a child's life, and sets them up for a happy and successful life as an adult. So that's what a black belt character is. So for us in the Warrior Academy, it's really a case of how can we build this community that we call the Warrior Family, to kind of move this whole movement forward. And rather than it being you're joining a club or a class, you're joining this movement of the development of the softer skills within martial arts. We're kind of using martial arts as a vehicle, because martial arts is such a good tool for self-development. We're using that as a vehicle, and a very exciting vehicle for young people to develop their character, which is far more important than developing self-defense skills. So to answer your question, is a black belt mindset important for parents, right?
Yeah, as well, yeah.
A black belt mindset and a black belt character is important for all of us. And I mean, it's a belief system, and it's a way of living. It's behavior, it's habits, it's mindset, it's everything, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, my immediate thoughts of black belt is these old movies of Chuck Norris doing these karate moves, and it almost seems counterintuitive to be talking about martial arts and also anti-bullying in the same context. But I'd like to go there and discuss that, because with I know from speaking to you in the past, you've been very, very much an advocate of anti-bullying campaigns, and you're set to launch, is it Not a Victim, is that correct?
Yeah, Not a Victim.
Yeah, so with that, can you kind of allay parents, I don't know, fears around bullying, and how martial arts is actually helping towards that anti-bullying?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at some of the biggest anti-bullying campaigns out there, things like Stomp Out Bullying and Stop Bullying, they're all about stopping bullying from happening. And from the research I've done over kind of 10 years of working with parents through bullying, which stems from a childhood of going through bullying for 4 years myself, and then interviewing lots of people who've gone through bullying, and writing books about it, doing podcasts on it, doing loads of surveys about it, all these different things, just becoming obsessed with understanding bullying and where it comes from, and working with some of the top psychologists in the world to really get to the bottom of this. What I've discovered is that we can't stop bullying. Bullying is ultimately an ugly part of the human condition.
Yeah.
And our kind of fear associated with bullying prevents us from understanding it. We don't want to. We don't want, as parents, we don't want to accept that bullying is going to happen to our children, right?
No.
And yesterday, my wife came home yesterday, and she caught 4 boys around our daughter, and she was in the middle crying, and they were calling her something, and she was crying, and she was very upset. My wife was very upset by it, and as you would expect any parent to be. And I said to her, look, this is normal. This is the first time she's going to experience that, but it's certainly not the end. What can you do from that? Yeah. And I think our approach with Not a Victim is ultimately not to remove children from the community in which they're being bullied as the priority. Straight away, if they're being bullied, remove them. Instead, and it's not to save them. Instead, it's to give them the tools to save themselves. Because what we often find is that if you save a child from bullying, they haven't learned the life lessons to overcome it on their own. Yeah. And then the cycle of bullying continues and repeats itself into adolescence, into adulthood, into the workplace. So ultimately, what we found is that, a child is likely to go down a route of misery or a route of magic when they go through bullying, right? And they either, there's this loss of freedom, and then they reach this breakthrough point, and then from this breakthrough point, they either, in most cases, if it's a negative route, they either become a bully themselves, or they start to display they start to display bullying behaviors.
Yeah.
Because they overcome the bullying and then they use that new confidence to bully other children. Yeah. Or they go through bullying, they try to stand up for it because there's a breakthrough area, and then it doesn't work out, and they sort of shrink into a former version of themselves and they become a victim. So either way, if they get on the route of misery, what we found is that they either become bullies, or they become children who exhibit bullying behavior, or they become a victim. The polar opposite of that is a child who's being mentored through bullying in the correct way. A child who is taught the context of bullying, why bullying occurs, how it's this flow of negative energy, how you can teach a child to replace the kind of the thoughts and feelings they've got towards the bully, which is typically fear, intimidation, anger, and all this sort of stuff, and replace that with sympathy, empathy, pity. What you often find is, by understanding the concept of bullying and where it's coming from, you can reduce the anxiety around bullying, which helps a lot. And things like developing body language and all the practical skills with that, the role-playing aspects, all the things we teach. But ultimately, by changing the context of bullying and why it occurs, you can really give children the tools to overcome it on their own. And what happens is, when a child goes through bullying and they're mentored through it the right way, bullying has got this amazing ability to make or break a child's character, right? Yeah. So I've spoken about how it can break a child's character. They become a bully or they become a victim.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that is how it can make a child's character.
Yeah.
So in the Not a Victim book, we interviewed some incredible people, amazing entrepreneurs, business owners, athletes, authors, people who have gone on to do amazing things, who look back and attest the severe bullying they had gone through to the success they experienced later in life.
Yes.
Right? The bullying that they went through wasn't necessarily a bad thing for them in the long term. Was it uncomfortable? Yes, of course. Was it just as uncomfortable for their parents? Yes, of course. Was it something that benefited them? Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And it's the uncomfortable truth, like the ugly truth of bullying, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Yes, it's wrong. Yes, we should try and prevent it as much as possible. Yeah. But more important than preventing it is giving our children the tools to cope with it and to break through it, right? If you remove your child from a situation or a community where they're being bullied and think it's going to stop, you'll put them into another community and they'll attract bullying into their lives.
Yeah.
Instead, helping them, developing them, mentoring them to give them the skills they need to overcome on their own will set them up to have a transformation, almost like post-traumatic growth,
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's funny as you're saying that, you're taking me back to not a time when I was bullied, but I was mugged at knife point. And, that was very traumatizing situation, which I kind of likened to that bullying moment. And for me, I didn't have that mentorship or that advice as how to deal with that. Like now I look at it and I'm kind of thankful that happened, because it did shape me. But at the time, I didn't have anyone helping me transition through that thought process, through that fear. Yeah. So I became almost like a social recluse, if that makes sense. I kind of went inwardly and tried to hide, because I didn't want to talk to my parents, because if I told my parents, I wouldn't be able to hang out with my friends again or go to town again. So I didn't know where to turn to. So I think
this is it, isn't it? The first thing that always happens with bullying is a breakdown in communication.
Yes.
Right. And it's like, as a young man going through bullying, as a young boy going through bullying, there could have been, in a lot of cases there is, an area of like toxic masculinity where they don't want to tell their mums or dads, especially don't want to tell their dads that they're going through bullying, because as a guy, you should be able to cope with it. You shouldn't let anyone pick on you, and that's it, right? So there's no such thing as bullying, because you shouldn't be going through it in the first place. And there's this element of, if I was to tell my parents, they might say something or do something which will restrict things even further, and then I'm going to lose even more freedom. So there's this element of loss of freedom as well, which becomes really apparent, right?
Yeah, it becomes.
But it's interesting. I mean, I was your first comment there, which said thank you, which said thank you. Sorry, just coming in here. Your first comment, which was that you were thankful, right? Really interesting, because it's totally aligned with my views on it. You know, I was on the radio, Virgin Radio in Dubai, 1 million listeners, and I was in the bullying panel, and they asked me if I could say one thing to those who bullied me when I was younger, what would I say? I said thank you. and you can imagine half the listeners would have been like, I get it, and the other half would have been like, no. What's he saying? No, this guy. I can imagine the emails they must have got afterwards. But you know, I think ultimately, you know, it's having perspective, right? And perspective is like the antidote to fear. It really is. If you can give your child perspective when they're at a point where they are most fearful, then I think you're able to completely mentor them through anything, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with, you know, linking that with your black belt mindset that you're teaching your students, you know, having that black belt mindset and going through that transition. So if they are bullied and they're going through the training, character building that you're going through, I imagine as a child, like looking back now, I would really appreciate that. I would have really appreciated that back then, because it would have given me the tools to be able to, I don't know, manage that transition. Because like I say, my focus was inwardly. I became, you know, almost depressed as a teenager. It took me a while to overcome that, but it wasn't actually until I started doing personal development, KPI, things like that, where I started to actually appreciate what had happened in my life and actually look back and be thankful of those moments, because it's led me to where I am today. I've got three beautiful children, 2 boys and a girl. I've got a beautiful wife. I've got a dog. I've got a house. You know, very, very grateful for what I've got. Before I going through that personal development journey myself, you know, I was very bitter. You know, I was always wanting, like, almost like wanting more and stuff. And I liken that attitude, or relate that attitude to that misunderstanding, if that makes sense. So that misunderstanding of the character building in myself. So I can hugely relate, and hopefully our audience will get a lot of value from that. I know I have certainly got a lot of value from that. I definitely need to work on my black belt mindset. You know, when we're talking about concentration, so something with the 2 boys in particular, obviously newborn, I don't know yet, but the 2 boys, getting them to concentrate on anything is very, very difficult. Would you say that the concentration techniques that you teach also help with like the likes of ADHD, ADD, those sorts of things?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So first of all, here's the big thing about concentration, right? Do you think your boys could sit down on the PlayStation or Xbox and concentrate on that?
Yes.
Right. So the reality is, if they're into something enough, they'll concentrate.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of parents are like, well, you know, they've got terrible concentration. And I asked that same simple question. So they haven't got terrible concentration. They have the ability to concentrate. They have the ability to concentrate in some cases very, very well. Like you could try and tear them off that and it'd be difficult, right? They might be 14 hours concentrating on that. Now, what it is a challenge of engagement. How do you keep them engaged? And that comes down to this individual with ADHD, for instance, may need a mentor who can be very, very agile, very mentally agile with them. Keep them busy. You know, keep them very, very guessing what's going to happen next, excited to be there. The activities you do need to be very stimulating, right? Now, that's what the video games are designed to do for a lot of these kids. So ultimately, when we know we've got a child who needs to work on their concentration, we plan sessions, or the team do. They plan sessions that are going to be incredibly exciting. You know, that 1 minute they'll be over here, the next minute they'll be over here. They'll be learning through playing over here. There'll be this challenge, that challenge, and then ultimately, what we do is we try and have this flow in a class, for instance, where we'll do something high energy and then we'll bring it straight back down to 1 minute meditation. Wow. Something high energy, bang, 1 minute meditation. So they get used to learning to control themselves from high energy to full control, high energy to full control. That, along with things like concentration activities, a lot of motor skill work that we do with them. We try and develop this attention to detail, and ultimately, what I found is giving children responsibility is one of the big things as well, right? If you give a child responsibility, that's often one of the things. One of the big frustrations I've got is that children with ADHD are often brought to us, and they're told, we've got a 9-year-old recently who's got ADHD. He came to the dojo, and parents said, this is my son, and they're very badly behaved. They're very naughty. And people in Dubai are very blunt. They say it how it is, right? And that's the cultural melting pot that we've got here. No one beats around the bush. They give it to you straight. So this is my child. They're very naughty. And okay, well, you're approaching that like, right. Okay, so first thing we need to do is sort of look at language and how we label, how we say things, because whatever we do paints a picture of what they'll become, right? Amen. And what I've noticed with especially children with ADHD is that because they struggle to focus on a lot of tasks which we give them, which typically aren't engaging enough, right? Because they need something that's super engaging. Then what happens is they don't perform in those. They get distracted during those, and they don't perform them in the way we want them to. And so therefore we say they're not concentrating, they're naughty, or they start playing up because they need more engagement, right? They need more stimulation, so they start playing up. Start trying to get more attention. So start trying to bring in more stimulation. And so from a young age, they're labeled naughty in school. They're labeled naughty when they get home. They're labeled naughty in their clubs. And they come to martial arts class at 9 years old, and they're told, hey, there you go, naughty child, fix it. So that's the issue, right? Now, what I found for the solution here is when you've got a child like that, giving them responsibility when they've been told they're naughty for so long because they haven't been able to concentrate, and this is so typical with ADHD, we give them responsibility. We paint a new picture. They come into the dojo as a blank piece of paper, right? A new canvas. And in the first 5 minutes, we can assess very quickly where they're at, what their character's like. And, a child who's always been labeled that will often try to get attention straight away. They may try and disrupt things or talk when they shouldn't talk, or, do the opposite of what they should do. And what this person's got, and then often other kids start following. So you could say in that situation, that child is badly behaved, or they're exhibiting bad behavior. I say they're a great influencer.
Yes.
Right? They're very good at influencing other people's behavior. So that's a leadership trait. Amen. In my opinion. Yes. So the way I approach it is I walk over to them and say, look, you look like you could be an excellent leader. I can see the way the other students look up to you already, and you've only been here 5 minutes. I would love you to join us as one of the leaders. And the classes, for instance, in this case, are set up in lines, right? Yeah. So I give them a small responsibility, like I would like you to lead your line by keeping everyone on their lines, making sure their belts are tied up. If they get loose, a basic task like that. And you can just see like their face light up. Like I've never been told that before in my life.
Yeah.
And they start to live up to this role.
Yes.
And, we start to say, right, can the leaders come over here? Other students here? Okay, cool. I mean, we circulate the leaders around a bit. So, we make sure it's fair. But the idea is that we're giving someone a role. At the end of class, you wouldn't believe it. They'll come up, shake hands. Thank you so much, sir. And, we'll go out and speak to the parents, say, your son's been an amazing leader today. They were looking after 5 of our students who were younger than them. And they kept the lines very straight. They tied up their belts. I was very impressed. A very influential member of the group. I'm really looking forward to next class. And it's just like a change in mindset, right? And you can start to see the parents sort of a light bulb going off, and we could actually approach this differently. Yeah. And that for me is like, I love that, because it's when we spoke before, how one of the things you want to do is influence children's lives. And one of the best ways of doing that is changing the mindset parents have.
Amen.
If you can influence a parent's mind, you can help their children, right? And so that's, for me, a lot of my work is workshops for parents, that sort of thing. That's what tends to make the difference for me.
Yeah, and I think as a parent, sometimes we don't see it. So Lauren and I have been through a lot of parent training, because we were looking at our child And a lot of people are saying, "Oh, he's naughty. He's having poo accidents and this, that, and the other." And we just wanted to approach it from a different angle. And a lot of people were like looking at us like we were crazy, like we wanted to do things differently. But we were trying to understand, well, it must be something we're doing because we're the biggest influence on our child. So how do we change it? And a lot of it has come back down to the fact that Tobias, it's not that he didn't want to go to the toilet, but he was so engaged in what he was doing, he would rather do what he was doing than go to the toilet.
Yeah.
But a lot of other parents would just label that as bad behavior. And to put it into context, my son's 5 years of age, so we were just trying to do something different. And that sounds to me like that's exactly what you're trying to do with the martial arts. You're using martial arts as a medium, and a lot of people will probably be listening to this episode thinking, almost pigeonholing martial arts and kind of going, it's not that at all.
yeah it's really interesting. This is why I always say, martial arts is an excellent vehicle for developing a child's character or for any self-development. It's one of those things that for thousands of years it's been used to teach self-defense, but B, to pass on strong values, a moral compass, a code, a way of living, and ultimately it's almost had this like disciple type hierarchy and structure going down generations to generations to generations as they pass this on, especially in the traditional styles. And it was more about a code of conduct than anything else. If you look at some of the old movies, it's just how it is, right? It's like a moral code. And there's so much that we can benefit from. So many modern problems can be solved with ancient solutions. Well,
it is, and I think there's a concern because I think there's a lot of people that are teaching martial arts and probably not doing it the right way. To put it into context, I won't name names, but I went to a kickboxing club, really, really enjoyed it from the fitness aspect. But then it was the way the club was run, it wasn't being taught the way you're saying, if that makes sense. It was being taught to, no, you've got to be the best.
Yeah.
You've done that wrong. You've got to do it differently. Like,
I mean, there's lots of different clubs out there, and some clubs are there are many clubs, different things. Like I've trained around the world in about 5 different continents in martial arts, and in some brutal gyms in Muay Thai, full contact, and like you wouldn't believe, 8 hours a day where you're using elbows and knees, and it's just hardcore stuff. And ultimately, if you're training someone up to compete in a very, very brutal style, the training needs to be quite brutal, But that's not what we're doing. So our whole approach is we're the only specialist character development center in the Middle East. Yeah. Our approach is to really focus on that character development. That's why we regularly have psychologists, mindful parent experts, digital safety experts, all coming to speak at the dojo. And we're very, very innovative in the way that we kind of we approach martial arts with this kind of ancient values but modern teaching style, right? And it even becomes apparent with our responsibility as a martial arts club. Like I said to you, huge part of being a martial artist or learning about martial arts is learning how to defend yourself physically. But how often are we actually attacked physically? Not very often, right? I mean, how often would you expect your child to have to use their self-defense techniques? But the attacks haven't stopped; they've just gone online. So what I've noticed is that the psychological, emotional, mental, they have now moved online into cyber attacks, and so our responsibility as a martial arts club hasn't changed. We need to be there to teach young people to defend themselves, but the way in which we teach that needs to also change as well. So ultimately, what we're now doing is we've launched the digital black belt, which goes alongside what we do, which is built into our syllabus. And when you send your child to us, they learn to defend themselves physically, but they also learn how to defend themselves from cyber attacks. And it's in order to get a black belt with us, they have to actually prove that they understand how to look after themselves online. So we actually ask our students to come in with their iPads, with their phones. We teach them the right settings. We have talks going on. We've got checklists for them. all these different things that our whole team are trained with. So it's that sort of approach, I think, which makes us quite different. Looking at it with a very long-term, broad view of what martial arts actually is.
I think it's a breath of fresh air, Sebastian, because I'd love for this to be infectious and infect the football arena. So, growing up in highly competitive football, nearly making it as a pro myself, it's not taught. Character development is not taught. My path may have been different had it been taught, if that makes sense, because I wanted to play football for the love of playing football, but as soon as you get to that professional standard, it's like there's this expectation that you have to go out there and you do a job. But as a 15, 16-year-old who's trying to manage those emotions, I wasn't given the tools to manage those emotions. Does that make sense? And I think there's so many football clubs that could benefit from changing their mantra from winning trophies to building that character. It's an absolute breath of fresh air. It's it's amazing. So have you got any like single tips, for just one tip for parents who are also running a business? Is there something that they could implement straight away with their child to help them get more of a black belt mindset, or something they could help implement themselves maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of managing both time with children and time with the business, that's what you mean?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's valuing your time. If you learn to value your time as a business owner, you'll see that as something which it's a finite resource, right? Which you really don't want to spend on too much. I mean, if you look into a lot of kind of stoic practices, a lot of it is protecting your time. So I've become very, very conscious of protecting my time from quite a young age. A lot of it is probably because of that accident with base jumping. Learning that if I don't build a team, I won't be able to. I won't be able to grow the business beyond myself, and I won't be able to rely on anyone. You can easily lose things if you don't have a team. So from a business side, I would say learning to delegate is one of the most important skills for an entrepreneur, and even more important if you're a dad or a mum, right? You've got to get good at delegating anything that isn't a super high value task.
Yeah.
Protecting your time, delegating early on, building a team early on. And it's one of the things that I find a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is like, how can I guarantee I will be able to, if I'm going to take someone on and pay them full-time wage of £2,000 or £3,000 a month, how am I going to guarantee that I'm going to be able to make that back? And the answer is you're not really. It's it's the entrepreneur's bet. This is the game you're in. And you're going to have to constantly ask yourself those sort of questions. You're not gambling. It's an informed decision, right? You do your research based on what you think you can do, and through the best of your knowledge, you act on that. You act on that, and you make a call. So for me, it's always been worth hiring people to grow the team. Whenever we've done that, I've ended up with less stress, more time, and I've scaled much faster. So my biggest tip to parents who are business owners would be to delegate early, build a team, and then when it comes to spending time with your children, I would just say plan ahead, because at the end of the day, unless you book in non-negotiable slots with your family and it's in your calendar and you treat it like a meeting, it probably won't happen, right?
I completely agree with that. It's interesting because when I'm going through our coaching program with clients, and you get them to show you their diary, and they've got things booked out for meeting with so and so, or staff meeting, and you've got all these things booked in. I'm like, where's your booking for like your family?
Yeah.
And you're right, because if you book it in your diary, it's going to happen, and you have to be that sacred time. So for me, like, that's non-negotiable. If that time is for family, that's it. You can't cut into that time. We can't go over. So the same for this interview. For me, it's hard stop 3:00, I'm going to go and pick Tobias up. I literally would down tools and walk out the door.
Yeah.
Because it's non-negotiable. Not only because I don't want him to be at school left alone, but I just think it's so important. And I also like what you're saying about delegating. So something that Lauren and I have been very, very good at, obviously COVID aside, we were getting people in to help like clean the house. We were using things like HelloFresh for the food. So we didn't have to think about the food. It was, we've got a meal plan. The meal plan's already been done for us. The food arrives, we cook it, we eat it. Like it's one less thing for us to think about. The cleaning, it's one less thing for us to think about. A lot of our friends were like, "Why have you got a cleaner?"
Yeah,
like I'm some posh person or something. But it's
yeah. I mean, you've read 4 Hour Workweek, right?
I have, yes.
I mean, such a brilliant book. I mean, I think I read that in my early 20s, and it was just, an inspiring book to read. It really influenced me, probably a bit too much. But you sort of outsource everything. But it's one of those things. One of the things I found is that you've got to outsource as much as you can.
Yeah.
But you've got to then use that time to do something else, or you just end up bored and depressed, and trying to seek, and you'll end up doing even lower value tasks than you were doing, right? You'll find a way to keep yourself busy. You will. Human beings do. And before you were doing something probably fairly productive, but you can still outsource it. So you've got to kind of find things that are going to really benefit you, and grow your business, or grow you as a person, or even just bring you joy and happiness in your life, right? And have that ready before you outsource to pour yourself into. That's the other thing I'd say. I've fallen down that trap many times.
With outsourcing, just thinking of something actionable the audience might be able to do. Have you got any tips on outsourcing? Have you got any tools or things?
Yeah, totally. So one of the things that I've discovered is that, and I discovered this during lockdown. The biggest thing that entrepreneurs and business owners spend their time doing is social media, right? They're making videos, they're doing clips, they're doing graphics, they're writing blogs, they're making quote pictures, they're trying their best to do as many things as possible. They're spending hours editing videos, and they didn't sign up to being a business owner, to be a graphic designer or a video editor or whatever, or a social media manager. But most of them are. They're spending, on average, we figured out from doing polls with over 200 people that business owners are spending something along the lines of 40 hours a month minimum on social media, creating this content. And so what I did with Jason, who I know is because for a long time we've been outsourcing with our own teams. So we put our teams together. We had about 15 full-time graphic designers, social media managers, video editors, all these amazing freelancers. We hired them all full-time, and we said, right, we're just going to go out there and see how many small business owners we can help. And we launched this, and within a week, we had 50 people signing up overnight. And the reality is, what we were offering was, we can take the time you spend on social media from 40 hours to 1 hour a month. So the idea is that you just send in 4 videos, beginning of the week, beginning of the month, and then we turn those into 200 social media clips, audiograms, quote pictures, blogs, stories, edited videos, all these different things that we do. So certainly if you want to, and I mentor a lot of business owners now, outside of what I do with the Warrior Academy, I do a lot of business mentoring and workshops. If you want to outsource in the quickest way possible, one of the easiest things to do is get rid of your social media. And it's called Ubiquitous, this business. And essentially it's about £400 a month, and it would save you 39 hours a month on average. So I can give you the link to that if you like.
Yeah, please. Yeah. And I'll drop it in the comments below. So I'll drop any links in the comments below. I've got a few links here, and then I'm going to bring this to a close to be respectful of your time, Sebastian, as well. So I've got notavictim.co.uk, which is, you're saying that's to be launched is it this week or next week?
Yeah, it's in 24 hours. I actually just messaged the website and I said, "Can you launch it now?" She said, "No, she's in India and they're just about to go into lockdown, so she can't click go." It's one of those COVID problems, isn't it? But yeah, so within 24 hours that'll be live.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a scorecard. If you go to notaVictim.co.uk, there's a scorecard which gives you an insight into how prepared you are to mentor your child through bullying. So that's a really good scorecard.
That's notaVictim.co.uk, yeah?
That's right, yeah.
Then we've got breakthrougharea.com. Was that the other scorecard you were talking about?
Yeah, so this breakthrough.com, it's a 45-question scorecard. It takes about 5 minutes to do, and it gives your child a score on the 3 C's: confidence, content, and concentration. Yeah. And it gives you a personalized PDF report on how you can improve those 3 C's. It's something you do on your own, not with your child.
Yeah. What about connecting with you personally? Are you more active on Instagram, Facebook?
Yeah, I'm on mostly Instagram, Facebook. So Facebook, it's Sebastian Bates. Instagram, it's seb.bates.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just show that on the video there, so you can see the spelling, and I'll share it at the bottom there. So I'm going to close it. I'm exceptionally happy I've done this today, Sebastian. I could literally keep talking about this subject for hours because it's something I'm incredibly passionate about.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your energy and enthusiasm and everything you're doing, because it literally is a breath of fresh air to me. And I just hope a lot more clubs take your ethos and copy it. Because to be honest with you, that's going to help so many children worldwide, and that's what I'm passionate here at Parents for CEO. It's not just helping the parents. I would really want to help the children, and in order to do that, I'm going to help the parents so that they can become better parents, run better businesses, so they can spend more time with their children. The Parents for CEO was also like what you're talking about. It's more of a movement. We're trying to break the mold. It's a mentality that you choose to allow in. It means kind of putting aside all those doubts, those fears and excuses. And something I believe very, very firmly is we are stronger together. And that's the whole reason why we created this community. So thank you for joining me today, Sebastian. And thank you for everyone listening. I hope you all have an amazing day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.